The handcuffs clicked before the coffee cup hit the floor. Marjorie Kane, our HOA self-appointed sheriff, had blown through my lakeside cabin door with 4 guys in matching black vests and a stack of rules no one had ever voted on, and she was dragging my wife toward the threshold when she froze, eyes locked on the bit of metal peeking from Lauren's shirt pocket. And I thought, okay, you just made the worst mistake of your life. I'm Jack Mercer, and if you think that sounds dramatic, yeah, that happened. But let me back up a sec so you know how we got here. It was a Tuesday sunlight sliding across the blueprints on my kitchen table, our little community hydro project, a run-of-the-creek setup that could take the edge off everyone's power bills. Lake water tapping the dock like a metronome, the smell of cedar and coffee, and my 17-year-old Ty mumbling into his phone because he'd been live streaming our tests for a few hundred subscribers who liked watching a teenager build something that actually worked. Lauren was outside, tuned in to the hum of the generator, the way surgeons tune in to heartbeats, methodical and calm, the one person on earth who could make stubborn machines act right with a wrench and a half smile. Then the door banged open and the performance started, Marjorie with her salon-armored hair and a voice like a siren waving a binder and barking Regulation 47B like it was carved in stone, her security team fanning out to photograph. My breakfast plates, I'm not kidding. While another guy squinted at our blueprints like he'd stumbled onto nuclear launch codes, she yelled illegal industrial operation, pointed at the creek like it had committed a felony, then marched straight at Lauren and snapped metal cuffs on her wrists loud enough for the sound to skip across the water and bounce back in little echoes that made my stomach cold. And Lauren, this is the part that should have tipped me, didn't flinch, just stood there with this steady measuring look like she was waiting for a train we both pretended not to hear. Then that glint. Small official tucked neat into her pocket, and Marjorie stalled mid-stride the way deer pause when they catch the shape of a hunter in Ty's live stream, which I'd forgotten existed because I was trying to remember if citizen arrest by HOA was even a thing shot from a few hundred to a few thousand viewers, comments arcing up the screen like bottle rockets, and in the middle of it all, I thought, this is bigger than our creek. It was. It had started 72 hours earlier with a meeting none of us were invited to. Our neighbor Dana Pike, engineer, dog walker, the kind of person who carries a notebook for fun, happened to stroll past the community center and see lights on and through a window. She watched Marjorie hold what she called an emergency session. 4 board members nodding along like dashboard bobbleheads while Marjorie read her own Bible. All technical or industrial operations prohibited due to safety. The phrase sounded serious if you said it fast and didn't know she'd printed half her safety studies from a blog that sells home generators in fear. Dana filmed the whole thing from the shrub line, shaky, grainy, perfect. And the next night she caught Marjorie in the parking lot taking an envelope from a man in a very expensive suit. The plate on his sedan traced to ArcLight Utilities, a company that fights neighborhood renewables like they're a contagion. You know what I mean. Once you see the seam in the curtain, you can't unsee it. Flyers showed up in mailboxes. Lauren Mercer, dishonorable discharge for equipment corruption, with a blown-up photo from her Coast Guard years, and a pile of fake quotes that read like a soap opera. A slick news site popped up, Lakeside Community Truth, every article screaming that our little generator would catch fire, electrocute the fish tank property values, probably summon locusts. I spent an evening with a laptop and too much coffee and traced the site's domain right back to Marjorie's credit card and IP address. Amateur hour. Ty, meanwhile, had fallen sideways into a spotlight. His clip of Marjorie cuffing Lauren exploded, and his comments turned into trench warfare between Team Mercer and Team Safety kids from his school, arguing with their parents through him, which is a special kind of exhausting. Then the SUVs started black-tinted parked where you'd feel them without seeing them, and an eviction notice slid under our door at 6 a.m., with 12 hours to cease industrial activity. The kind of letter that tries to scare you with fonts. People think you choose courage most days. It feels like it chooses you. Lauren kept taking calls in a quiet voice, said they were yoga friends moving class again, and I chose to believe her because you do that in a marriage. until you don't. By noon, Marjorie had set up a command post, folding tables, walkie-talkies, clipboards full of nothing, and her goons wore vests that tried very hard to look armored. It would have been funny if not for their cuffs and the way one of them rested a hand on a baton he didn't deserve. That morning something else moved while Marjorie posed. Hank Alvarez, a fisherman who fixes outboard motors with hands like oak roots, and who'd been biting his tongue for months, made calls of his own, boat owners, night shift linemen, families who'd had their power cut one winter too many, and by late morning almost 40 people lined the marina, arms crossed, phones out a quiet wall of witnesses. Ty's live stream ticked past 15,000, then 20 bloggers, activists, a couple legit reporters sniffing a bigger story. And Lauren, she laid out our documents, checked a small device I didn't recognize, slipped that pocket badge so it sat just where you'd see it if you were looking for trouble. I finally asked, "What is all this?" And she smiled like someone who'd solved a hard math problem. "You'll see," she said, which is not reassuring in case you're wondering. Noon hit, and Marjorie marched like she'd rehearsed it with a mirror. "You have violated the eviction order," she announced, voice booming, patches on her shoulders that said HOA enforcement, like that's a real thing. And when one of her guys reached for Lauren, my wife straightened, pulled the card from her pocket, and her voice dropped into a register I'd never heard, firm and trained. "Everyone stop. I'm Special Agent Lauren Mercer, Federal Energy Integrity Division. You're interfering with an active federal investigation." The shoreline went silent. Mid-applause, mid-gasp, mid-snark comment. Because authority is a sound you recognize before you decide to. Marjorie sputtered, "That's not real. You're just a housewife." And Lauren produced the badge and a second ID clean as truth, and that's when the black SUVs rolled forward like they'd been waiting for their cue. Real agents stepped out in gear that didn't pretend moved with that economy you only learn from doing it for years, and the lead, a calm man who introduced himself as Agent Collins, read Marjorie her rights for conspiracy, fraud, bribery, interference with federal energy regs, the list long enough to need breath. The security team took several respectful steps back suddenly, independent contractors with weekend plans. Ty's stream went thermonuclear. Hank and the marina crowd started clapping slow, relieved to sound like pressure leaving a boiler. Here's where the side twist landed. While Lauren ran her sting, Dana had been threading a needle, email shell companies' checks routed through 12 banks, the ArcLight executive's travel logs. His name was Graham Keller, and his title might as well have been bribes. But make it friendly, and she'd synced with Lauren so that the moment cuffs touched Marjorie's wrists, Ty's feed began dropping the receipts, bank images, email chains with bullet points labeled fire hazard messaging, photos of the parking lot handshake. 20,000 people watched the receipts roll. The community didn't flip it, exhaled like, "Oh, we were played." If you're waiting for poetic justice, fate showed up early. Marjorie tried to bolt toward the water she always did. Loved theatrics, caught her toe on our cable run, and swan dived into the shallows, face first, popping up with lakeweed, like a green sash sputtering about unlawful entrapment, while the actual law helped her to her feet. "Yeah," I laughed, couldn't help it. Then I felt my legs shake from everything that had been knotted tight, unspooling at once. After that, it moved fast and slow at the same time. The agents boxed up files, carried out hard drives, nodded to Lauren like colleagues coming off a long case. Over the next month, indictments rolled across 8 states. ArcLight people, local leaders, HOA, presidents who'd treated power like a hobby they could weaponize. Our project, the thing we'd built out of curiosity and stubbornness, got designated a pilot for rural renewables funding enough to replace my plywood table with a proper control shed and to wire in households that had learned to time laundry to off-peak rates like it was a sport. Hank got elected HOA president without making a speech. He just raised his hand and everyone else put theirs down. Ty became the kid reporters wanted to talk to. Which is funny when you've still got algebra homework. He started a little nonprofit with a name so earnest, I told him to keep it helping other towns document nonsense before it metastasizes. Dana, who never wanted the spotlight, changed more by what she wouldn't accept than anything she said. She's the one who reminds us. The point isn't winning online, it's lights on in winter and neighbors waving again at the dock. And Lauren, she got a medal at the community center, which felt right and weird all at once because the person they were honoring had been standing next to me at the sink every night rinsing coffee cups and talking about marinades, and also had been wearing a wire under a flannel shirt while a corporation tried to choke our town. She spoke briefly. Steady, humble, said. The hardest part was letting harm happen in small doses so bigger harm could be proved, and I understood why she stared at the lake some evenings like it owed her an answer. 6 months later, a letter hit the local paper from federal prison. Marjorie asking about a job in the facility's electrical shop, explaining that she'd completed coursework on renewable systems and wanted to contribute positively. Hank suggested we send her Ties beginner videos and with a half grin said, "Education's for everyone." Maybe that's growth, maybe it's PR. Either way, the lake didn't ripple. Now the generator's hum is our town's heartbeat. On certain nights, the whole shoreline glows in a way that feels both old and brand new. Porch lights warm on cedar kids chasing each other with flashlights. Someone frying fish. 2 cabins over. And when I throw the main breaker after an adjustment and feel the surge take, I think about authority and fear and how quickly a rule book turns to ash when it never had a vote behind it. We didn't become heroes, we got tired of being managed. You know what I mean? I also think about the line where public shaming becomes justice or just spectacle, where a live stream saves you or hangs you. How far undercover should go when your kid's sleep is the thing you're bargaining with questions that don't fit neat on a plaque. We flip the power on and turn to page, but the book is still being written by all of us in little decisions that add up. So tell me where you land. Was Lauren right to let the theater play out to catch the bigger fish? Was the crowd on the shoreline a shield or a fuse? What would you have done if the knock came on your door? Drop your take, right? Wrong somewhere messy in the middle, because communities don't stay whole by pretending there's no fight. They stay whole by arguing toward the light.